Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishamahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us. May he guide us and give us strength and right understanding. May love and harmony be with us all. Peace, peace, peace. And good evening. We're here at the Vedanta Society and we're reading from the complete works of Swami Abhedananada. On Friday night we've been working on the various disciples of Sri Ramakrishna that have written works. We started with Vivekananda and we've worked our way through most of the disciples that actually have written teachings. And Abhedananda probably has more written teachings than any of them. So we've been working through some of his, and we are in the middle of the lecture on reincarnation. And Atma here is going to read for us. So we're going to be starting at the bottom of 164.
We shall be better able to understand that process by studying how the seeds of different trees select from the common environments different materials and absorb and assimilate different quantities of elements. Suppose two seeds, one of an oak and the other of a chestnut, are planted in a pot. The power of growth in both the seeds is of the same nature. The environment's earth, water, heat, and light are the same. Still, there is some peculiarity in each of the seeds which will absorb from the common environments different quantities of elements and other properties which are fit to help the growth of the peculiar nature and form of the fruit, flower, leaves of each tree. Suppose the chestnut is a horse chestnut. If under different conditions the peculiar nature of the horse chestnut changes into that of a sweet chestnut, then along with the changes in the seed, the whole nature of the tree, leaves and fruits will also be changed, will no more attract, absorb, or assimilate those substances and qualities of the environments which it did when it was a horse chestnut. Now, similarly, through the law of natural selection, the newly molded thought body of the dying person will choose and attract such parts from the common environments as are helpful to its proper expression or manifestation. Parents are nothing but the principal parts of the environment of the reincarnating individual. The newly molded inner nature or subtle body of the individual will, by the law of natural selection, involuntarily choose or be unconsciously drawn to, as it were, its suitable parents, and will be born of them. For instance, if I have a strong desire to become an artist, and if after a lifelong struggle I do not succeed in being the greatest after the death of the body, I will be born of such parents and with such environments as will help me to become the best artist.
Yeah, just a couple of comments on things that are somewhat related to this. Years ago, I read a book called Biochemical Individuality. And a picture of a person with 3 eyes in the front. It's a cartoon picture. But it had one medical test after the other, or experiment after the other, as to how different people assimilate different materials. And the huge range of assimilation that took place in different people. In other words, they would give nutrient levels to different at different levels to all the different people, and they'd keep measuring, their blood levels and their urine levels of things that had been passed through the body, to determine how much of the various nutrients that people were assimilating, and the variation was huge. It was just astounding at how different people are. So, which explains why one person's diet doesn't necessarily agree with another, and why one medicine doesn't necessarily agree with everybody. So we are rather different, even though we're all humans. We're all rather different. Let's see, was there something else? It seemed like there was something else I was going to say, but now I can't remember. When you look at twin studies too, you find differences. Even though two twins are genetically identical, they don't necessarily always react the same way to everything in their environment. There's something different about it, and it's not just genetics, that there's something else there going on. Another thing I've thought of was I've heard of incidences where a person with multiple personalities,
Dissociative identity disorder.
where they have more than one personality that can manifest, and they will have different medical conditions in each of those personalities. The one context I was reading about was allergies, where in one personality the person's allergic to, say, strawberries or citrus fruit or something, and yet if they're in the other personality, they don't have any trouble eating it at all. So various very peculiar things can happen. All right, let's go on.
The whole process is expressed in Eastern philosophy by the doctrine of reincarnation of the individual soul. Although this doctrine is commonly rejected in the West, it is unreservedly accepted by the vast majority of mankind of the present day, as it was in past centuries. The scientific explanation of this theory we find nowhere except in the writings of the Hindus. Still, we know that from very ancient times it was believed by the philosophers, sages, and prophets of different countries. The ancient civilization of Egypt was built upon a crude form of the doctrine of reincarnation. Herodotus says, the Egyptians propounded the theory that the human soul is imperishable, and that where the body of anyone dies, it enters into some other creature that may be ready to receive it. Pythagoras and his disciples spread it through Greece and Italy. Pythagoras says all has soul. All is soul wandering in the organic world and obeying eternal will or law. In Dryden's Ovid, we read, death has no power the immortal soul to slay, that when its present body turns to clay, seeks a fresh home, and with unlessened might inspires another frame with life and light. It was the keynote of Plato's philosophy. Plato says, soul is older than body. Souls are continually born over again into this life. The idea of reincarnation was spread widely in Greece and Italy by Pythagoras, Empedocles, I'm not familiar, Plato, Virgil, and Ovid. It was known to the Neoplatonists, Plotinus, and Proclus. Plotinus says the soul leaving the body becomes that power which it has most developed. Let us fly then from here below and rise to the intellectual world, that we may not fall into a purely sensible life by allowing ourselves to follow sensible images. It was the fundamental principle of the religion of the Persian Magi. Alexander the Great accepted this idea after coming in contact with the Hindu philosophers. Julius Caesar found that the Gauls had some belief regarding the pre-existence of the human soul. The Druids of Old Gaul believed that the souls of men transmigrate into those bodies whose habits and characters they most resemble. Celts and Britons were impressed with this idea. It was a favorite theme of the Arab philosophers and many Mohammedan Sufis. The Jews adopted it after the Babylonian captivity. Philo of Alexandria, who was a contemporary of Christ, preached amongst the Hebrews the Platonic idea of the pre-existence and rebirth of human souls. Philo says the company of disembodied souls is distributed in various orders. The law of some of them is to enter mortal bodies, and after certain prescribed periods, be again set free. John the Baptist was, according to the Jews, a second Elijah. Jesus was believed by many to be the reappearance of some other prophet. See Matthew 16:14, also 17:12. Solomon says in his Book of Wisdom, I was a child of good nature, and a good soul came to me. Or rather, because I was good, I came into an undefiled body. The Talmud and Kabbalah teach the same thing. In the Talmud it is said that Abel's soul passed into the body of Seth, and then into that of Moses. Along with the spread of the Kabbalah, this doctrine, which was known as transmigration and metempsychosis, began to take root in Judaism, and then it gained believers even among men who were little inclined towards mysticism. Judah ben Asher, for instance, discussing the doctrine in a letter to his father, endeavored to place it upon a philosophical basis. We also read the Kabbalists eagerly adopted the doctrine on account of the vast field it offered to mystic speculations. Moreover, it was almost a necessary corollary of their psychological system. The absolute condition of the soul is, according to them, its return after developing all those perfections, the germs of which are eternally implanted in it to the infinite source from which it emanated. Another term of life must therefore be vouchsafed to those souls which have not fulfilled their destiny here below, and have not sufficiently purified for the state of union with the primordial cause. Hence, if the soul, on its first assumption of human body and sojourn on earth, fails to acquire that experience for which it descended from heaven, and becomes contaminated by that which is polluting, it must re-inhabit a body till it is able to ascend in a purified state through repeated trials. This is the theory of the Zohar, which says all souls are subject to transmigration, and men do not know ways of the Holy One, blessed be He. They do not know they are brought before the tribunal, both before they enter the world and after they leave it. They are ignorant of many transmigrations and secret probations which they have to undergo, and of the number of souls and spirits which enter into this world and which do not return to the palace of the heavenly King. Men do not know how the souls revolve like a stone which is thrown from a sling. The time is at hand when these mysteries will be disclosed.
Yeah, it sounds very reminiscent of passages you find in the Bhagavad Gita, isn't it? Which you'll probably bring out later. But and it's interesting how many different cultures have had the idea of reincarnation. We're often just led to believe that the common Western view is the current Christian view, and of course even in Christianity it wasn't the common view before about, 400 or something. So anyway, I remember a lecture by a philosopher, and he was talking about Descartes, and Descartes felt that humans were special and that they had souls, and that animals were more or less automatons and they didn't have a soul. And the philosopher said, clearly Descartes didn't have pets. So, all right, well, let's go on and find out more about the Kabbalists.
Like many of the church fathers, the Kabbalists used as their main argument in favor of the doctrine of metempsychosis, the justice of God. But for the belief in metempsychosis, maintained the question why God often permits the wicked to lead a happy life, while many righteous are miserable, would be unanswerable. Then, too, the infliction of pain upon children would be an act of cruelty unless it is imposed in punishment of sin committed by the soul in a previous state. Isaac Abravani sees in the commandment of the Levirate a proof of the doctrine of metempsychosis, for which he gives the following reasons. 1. God in his mercy willed that another should be given to the soul, which having yielded to the lying temperament of the body, had committed a capital sin, such as murder, adultery, and so forth. It is only just that when a man dies young, a chance should be given to his soul to execute in another body the good deeds which it had not had time to perform in the first body. 3. The soul of the wicked sometimes passes into another body in order to receive its deserved punishment here below instead of in the other world, where it would be much more severe. Commentary on Deuteronomy 15:5.
Yeah, and of course, since we know of people that have, when they're young, they have memories of past lives, that certainly can't be something that's just a current phenomenon. I'm sure human beings, since human beings were able to talk and communicate and express their opinions, must have had inklings of these things, a few of them anyway. There must have been incidences where children had memories of other lifetimes and so forth. So the fact that other cultures had beliefs in a reincarnation type theory really shouldn't be too surprising. Again, truth is one, and people just rediscover it and give it different names and different names of doctrines, and sometimes the details of the doctrines are a little different. Some people that are very detailed about their philosophical opinions will point out differences between what metempsychosis is and what Plato's ideas are and how they differ from Vedanta. But the interesting point is that there's this general theory, widespread through many, many cultures and ages, that the soul exists in more than one body, one after the other. So let's see what Abhedananada is going to tell us next about Christianity.
Christianity is not exempt from this idea. Origen and other church fathers believed in it. Origen says, "For God, justly disposing of his creatures according to their desert, united the diversities of minds in our congruous world, that he might, as it were, adorn his mansion, in which ought to be not only vases of gold and silver, but of wood also and clay, and some to honor, and some to dishonor, with these diverse vases, minds, or souls."
Is that the way we pronounce it? Is it Origen or just Origin?
I'm not sure.
Not sure. All right.
How do you want it pronounced?
I've always heard Origin, but
Origin.
Yeah.
Okay. To these causes, the world owes its diversity, while divine providence disposes each according to his tendency, mind, and disposition. He also says, "I think this is a question how it happens, that the human mind is influenced now by the good, now by the evil. The causes of this, I suspect, to be more ancient than the corporeal birth." The idea of reincarnation spread so fast amongst the early Christians that Justinian was obliged to suppress it by passing a law in the Council of Constantinople in 538 AD. The law was this: whoever shall support the mythical presentation of the pre-existence of the soul and the consequently wonderful opinion of its return, let him be anathema. The Gnostics and Maccabeans, I don't know that, propagated the tenets of reincarnation amongst the medieval sects, such as the Borgomiles and Paulicians. Some of the followers of this so-called erroneous belief were cruelly persecuted in 385 AD.
Yeah, I heard a story that it was Justinian's wife that wanted to make sure that she was going to get liberated in one lifetime, and she didn't want to have to come back and do it in another lifetime. So she was, I don't know whether that's true or not. We probably don't know for sure. But anyway, that was one story. It seems odd that they think that simply by passing a decree that's the way it is. It's the way it is, whether we believe in it or not. So whether we're right or we're wrong, it's some way, but it's so really these are best looked at as theories which explain our current condition and help us deal with it in a particular way. Science is that way too. We don't exactly know what the atom looks like, and we have quantum theory and the Standard Model and all these things that do a great job of predicting various things, but they're not perfect models. There are difficulties with them. And so we can't really say that definitively that this is the way the atom is. It doesn't even give you a very physical picture of the atom. And so similarly, Maya is inscrutable, and I don't think any description of it's going to be perfect, but we have theories which seem to make the most sense and give us the best model, a working hypothesis upon which to base our beliefs and our lives. So let's go on with the 17th century. We're coming right along here.
In the 17th century, some of the Cambridge Platonists, as Dr. Henry Moore, and others accepted the idea of rebirth. Most of the German philosophers of the Middle Ages and of recent days have advocated and upheld this doctrine. Many quotations can be given from the writings of great thinkers like Kant, Scotus, Schelling.
That was supposed to be Kant. I think
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think the scanning was off.
Any of the others off?
I don't know them well enough.
Neither do I. Scotus, Schelling, Fichte, Leibniz, Schopenhauer,
I think it's Fichte, but I'm not sure.
Giordano Bruno, Goethe, Lessing, Herder, and a host of others.
Yeah, Fichte and Leibniz, those, and Schopenhauer, those we know, and Giordano, okay.
The great skeptic Hume says in his posthumous essay on the immortality of the soul, the metempsychosis is therefore the only system of this kind that philosophy can hearken to. Scientists like Flamarland and Huxley have supported this doctrine of reincarnation. Professor Huxley says, none but hasty thinkers will reject it on the ground of inherent absurdity. Like the doctrine of evolution itself, that of transmigration has its roots in the world of reality. Some of the theological leaders have preached it. The eminent Christian theologian, Dr. Julius Muner, supports this theory in his work on the Christian doctrine of sin. Prominent theologians such as Dr. Domer, Ernesti, Rockert, Edward Beecher, Henry Ward Beecher, Phillips Brooks preached many a time touching the question of the preexistence and rebirth of the individual soul. Swedenborg and Emerson maintained it. Emerson says in his essay on experience, we wake and find ourselves on a stair. There are stairs below us, which we seem to have ascended, and there are stairs above us, many a one, which go upward and out of sight. Almost all of the poets, ancient or modern, profess it. William Wordsworth says in Intimations of Immortality, the soul that rises with us, our life's star, hath had elsewhere its setting and cometh from afar. Tennyson writes in The Two Voices, or if through lower lives I came, though all experience past became, consolidate in mind and frame, I might forget my weaker lot, for is not our first year forgot? The haunts of memory echo not. And while Whitman says in Leaves of Grass, as to you, life, I reckon you are the leavings of many deaths. No doubt I have died myself 10,000 times before. Similar passages can be quoted from almost all the poets of different countries. Even amongst the Aboriginal tribes of Africa, Asia, North and South America, traces of this belief in the rebirth of souls is to be found. Nearly 3/4 of the population of Asia believe in the doctrine of reincarnation, and through it they find a satisfactory explanation of the problem of life. There is no religion which denies the continuity of the individual soul after death. Those who do not believe in reincarnation try to explain the world of inequities and diversities either by the one-birth theory or by the theory of hereditary transmission. Neither of those theories, however, is sufficient to explain the inequalities that we meet with in our everyday life. Those who believe in the one-birth theory, that we have come here for the first and last time, do not understand that the acquirement of wisdom and experience is the purpose of human life. Nor can they explain why children who die young should come into existence and pass away without getting the opportunity to learn anything, or what purpose is served by their coming, thus for a few days, remaining in utter ignorance, and then passing away without gaining anything whatever. The Christian dogma based on the one-birth theory tells us that the child which dies soon after its birth is sure to be saved and will enjoy eternal life and everlasting happiness in heaven. The Christians who really believe in this dogma ought to pray to their Heavenly Father for the death of their children immediately after their birth, and ought to thank the merciful Father when the grave closes over their little forms. Thus, the one-birth theory of Christian theology does not remove any difficulty.
Yeah, when you think about it, so often some scars, you could say, or our impressions from past lives are activated in various ways. At least this would be the seeming assumption. You know, for example, everybody watches the Olympics when they're on television, but some little kid gets inspired by the gymnast or the high diver or the swimmers, and they suddenly feel like, gosh, that's what I want to do. I want to do like that. Or they hear a violinist playing a concert, or they hear a rock star, and suddenly they feel, that's what I want to do. I want to do that. Or they'll hear somebody playing the harp or whatever. Or they go to a museum and they see a sculpture and they suddenly get this urge to learn how to do sculpting. Things that they might never have thought of, and then all of a sudden it gets into their head that this is their aspiration in life, is that they want to do it. May happen because you read a book and suddenly everything sort of clicks, and you feel that this is the answer to your questions, and it's going to help you lead your life better. So we all have these latent impressions that bubble up when the right stimulus comes about and activates some impression that's back there, but we can't really bring it to full consciousness, but it comes about. Or perhaps preference for pets. You know, maybe one person really loves horses, another one loves dogs, another one loves birds or fish or something. And so these tendencies to like certain things are probably coming in from some sort of past life experience. All right, well, let's talk about two great religions here.
Two great religions, Judaism with its two offspring, Christianity and Mohammedanism, and also Zoroastrianism, still uphold the one-birth theory. The followers of these, shutting their eyes to the absurdity and unreasonableness of such a theory, believe that human souls are created out of nothing at the time of the birth of their bodies, and that they continue to exist throughout eternity, either to suffer or to enjoy because of the deeds performed during the short period of their earthly existence. Here the question arises, why should a man be held responsible throughout eternity for the works which he was forced or predestined to perform by the will of the Lord of the universe. The theory of predestination and grace, instead of explaining the difficulty, makes God partial and unjust. As the omnipotent personal God created human souls out of nothing, could he not make all souls equally good and happy? Why does he make one to enjoy all the blessings of life and another to suffer all miseries throughout eternity?
Wouldn't be an interesting plot that way. All right.
Why is one born with good tendencies and another with evil ones? Why is one man virtuous throughout his life and another bestial? Why is one born intelligent and another idiotic? If God out of his own will made all these inequalities, or in other words, if God created one man to suffer and another to enjoy, then how partial and unjust must he be? He must be worse than a tyrant. How can we worship him? How can we call him just and merciful? Some people try to save God from this charge of partiality and injustice by saying all good things of this universe are the work of God, and all evil things are the work of a demon or Satan. But God created everything good, but it was Satan who brought evil into the world, made everything bad. Now let us see how far such a statement is logically correct. Good and evil are two relative terms. The existence of one depends upon that of the other. Good cannot exist without evil, and evil cannot exist without being related to good. When God created what we call good, he must have created evil at the same time. Otherwise, he could not create good alone. If the creator of evil, call him by whatever name you like, had brought evil into this world, he must have created it simultaneously with good. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for God to create good, which can exist only as related to evil. As such, they will have to admit that the creators of good and evil sat together at the same time to create this world, which is a mixture of good and evil. Consequently, both of them are equally powerful and are limited by each other. Therefore, neither of them is infinite in powers or omnipotent. So we cannot say that the Almighty God of the universe created good alone and not the evil. Another argument which the Vedantists advance in support of the theory of reincarnation is that nothing is destroyed in the universe. Destruction in the sense of the annihilation of the thing is unknown to Vedantic philosophers, just as it is unknown to the modern scientists. They say non-existence can never become existence, and existence can never become non-existence. Or, in other words, what did not exist can never exist, and conversely, what exists in any form can never become non-existence. This is the law of nature.
Yeah, of course, when they create these particles and particle accelerators, they can create out of energy. They create pairs of particles, but they're always matter and antimatter. So there again, you get the same idea. Out of energy, you can create pairs of opposites, but you can't just create one half of the pair of opposite. So that's a perfect illustration in the physical world of how things have to be done. Now, the world we see, of course, is made up of pairs of opposites that aren't exactly pairs of opposites. Their antiparticles don't seem to be around. We can observe them in particle accelerators, but they're not around in the normal universe that we perceive. And yet, we still see pairs of opposites that are, because they're not exactly opposite, they're opposite in one sense, but not in another. The world doesn't fall apart in a flash of a second. So that's the interesting way the universe is created. So you have the positive charge and the negative charge, but the proton is much heavier than the electron. If it were an electron and an anti-electron, or a proton and an anti-proton, then they would just annihilate each other and go back to energy. But because their masses are different, then they can't do that. They stick around a while. So that's how the Divine Mother has her fun. She gets a universe that sticks around. And when you think about it, too, if you've ever talked to somebody that's written a novel or a play or a screenplay or something, there's always got to be some sort of antagonist. You can't just have everybody cheery and good and happy and cooperating. They'll tell you, well, that's not a very interesting plot. You have to have some sort of antagonist in this. There's got to be some, the bad guy of the black hat, right? That's another idea, is if this is the divine play, then you expect the divine play to have all sorts of things in it. You've got to have both ideas in it. Okay, let's go on with Swami Abhedananada here.
As such, the impressions or ideas which we now have together with the powers which we possess will not be destroyed, but will remain with us in some form or other. Our bodies may change, but the powers, karmas, samskaras, or impressions, and the materials which manufactured our bodies must remain in us in an unmanifested form. They will never be destroyed. Again, science tells us what remains in an unmanifested or potential state must at some time or other be manifested in a kinetic or actual form. Therefore, we shall get other bodies sooner or later. It is for this reason, said in the Bhagavad Gita, birth must be followed by death, and death must be followed by birth. For such a continuously recurring series of births and deaths, each germ of life must go through different stages of evolution, being bound by the law of karma. Another consideration is that the beginning, ending, and continuing are conceptions of the human mind. Their significance depends entirely upon our conception of time. We all know that time has no absolute existence. It is merely a form of our knowledge of our own existence in relation to that of nature. The conception of time vanishes at the sleep of death, just as it does every night when we are in sound sleep. Death resembles the state of our sound sleep. The soul wakes up from the sleep of death just in the same manner as the insects awake in spring after sleeping the long and rigid winter sleep, as the chrysalis in the bed of a cocoon spun by itself in autumn. Nature teaches us the great lesson of rebirth and the similarity between sleep and death by the rejuvenation of the chrysalis in the spring. After death, the soul wakes up and puts on or manufactures the garment of a new body, just in the same manner as we put on new clothes after throwing away the old and worn out ones. Thus the soul continues to manifest itself over and over again, either on the human or any other plane of existence, being bound by the law of karma or of cause and sequence. Death, so called, is but older matter dressed in some new form. And in a varied vest from tenement to tenement, though tossed, the soul is still the same, the figure only lost. I'm confused here. Pythagoras, Dryden's Ovid. I don't know what they mean here by Poe. This is Edgar Allan Poe.
Oh, it says poem.
Oh, poem. Well, that explains
You're
it.
missing a letter somewhere.
Right. Here it may be asked, if we existed before our birth, why do we not remember? This is one of the strongest objections often raised against the belief in pre-existence. Some people deny the existence of the soul in the past simply because they cannot remember the events of their past. Others, again, who hold memory as the standard of existence, say if our memory of the present ceases to exist at the time of death, with it, we shall also cease to be. We cannot be immortal because they hold that memory is the standard of life, and if we do not remember, then we are not the same beings.
Well, I have trouble remembering what happened yesterday, much less 70 years ago or in the previous lifetime. That's always struck me as a very odd objection. Most people remember almost nothing before the age of 4 or 5, and you expect them to remember what happened in a previous life. That's another interesting observation, is that most of the past life remembrances occur in children before the age of 4 or 5. And as they grow older, those memories tend to fade away. So, and I'm sure we've all had experiences where, well, even in school, one subject just seems easy and another one just seems really hard, and it's probably because you had some previous experience where you already learned this stuff in a previous life. So you're just relearning it. You're just putting it back in the brain cells. But if you hadn't had the opportunity to learn that particular subject, then it'd all be brand new, and nothing would seem very familiar. So we feel more comfortable with certain things because we've had some previous experience with them. It's too bad we don't have a larger group of people to talk about it, but it could get people's stories if they've ever had a situation where they go someplace and they feel like they've been there before, even though they've never been there before, or they just feel very comfortable in a particular place. And sometimes you feel very comfortable with people that you've never met and you don't really know why. So again, you may have had past life experiences with those people. And of course, there are whole books full of incidences of people that have remembered their past lives or have past experiences. And there was a series on television a while back, and you can still get it on the internet if you Google. I always forget the exact name. It's something like Ghosts Within My Child or something like that, where these parents were all troubled by their children's pictures or their nightmares or their stories or things that they said that didn't make any sense to the parents. And in one case, the kid came home and said that the teacher had asked her who her mother was, and I told her that my mother's name was such and such, and that wasn't the current mother's name, and that shocked the mother. And this went on, and eventually they were able to get enough evidence that this kid was remembering an actual past life of somebody that they could document. There were several of them like that. There were people that had died in war. One of them could identify the type of plane that he had been flying, and they were able to identify the pilot of the plane, and it matched the name and so forth that the kid was remembering that his name was. And there are several earlier documented things in what was the name of that person that did the book on reincarnation originally? Probably the first one, Stevenson, yeah. Several, and many of his were from India, where little kids would claim that they had recently died and that their family was still living in another village, and they wanted to go see them. They could tell them where the house was and what the house looked like and the names of the relatives and all sorts of things. So their memories were really, really very, very good. And of course, we had did I tell this recently? I don't want to repeat things too recently, but John Dobson took care of a lady who was dying of cancer, and she used to talk in her sleep. And every once in a while she would talk in French. And her French was very good. He knew enough French to know good French when he heard it. When she was awake, her French was terrible. But when she was asleep, her French was very good. So, and she was the one that said that she had been taught the Gayatri mantra. And so John was able to talk to her when she was asleep. So he'd say, well, who taught you the Gayatri mantra? Oh, I learned it on the ferry boat crossing the bay from a Swami. So she must have met, Abhedananada or Vivekananda, or one of the early direct disciples. And then when she got into this lifetime, she just suddenly found Vedanta when she heard John talking at a yoga camp. It wasn't a Vedanta center; it was some other yoga camp. And she heard him talk and got very interested, and so she wanted to go ask him more questions. So she visited him in his room and saw a picture of Holy Mother and almost went crazy. Who is that? Who's that lady? And she'd never seen her before, but apparently she'd had a dream of her or something, and had a dream of Holy Mother and didn't know who it was. And so people have that experience. We have several people like that, where people have had a dream of Vivekananda or Ramakrishna. Dr. Ventura, that lived across the street many, many years ago, had a dream of, I'm forgetting which one it was, whether it was Vivekananda or Ramakrishna that he had a dream of. And eventually found out who it was that he'd had a dream of, and so then they became devotees. So all these things really point to the fact that we seem to be connected to people that had previous lifetime experiences. And that it's not just a one lifetime event, but that we come from a series of lives, and that our talents, our aspirations, our good habits and our bad habits are often due to the past lives that we've had. And so, but the important thing to remember is to not try to blame our past lives on things, as trying to blame your parents on everything. Well, my parents did this and they did that, so that's why I'm the way I am. And well, then you can change who you are. The theory of karma says you can then change who you are. Starting from today, you can change your karmic patterns by creating new habits and new ways of thinking. So we can always counteract our old habits and bad ways and previous samskaras by creating new ones and going from there. Well, we shall close now. We've been over. We were going to do 45 minutes. We did 50, but I think that's probably enough to digest for one evening, and we will continue with the ideas of reincarnation by Swami Abhedananada next week. So stay tuned. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Filled with Brahman are the things we see. Filled with Brahman are the things we see not. From out of Brahman floweth all that is. From Brahman all, yet is it still the same. Peace, peace, peace.